Feeling like a black sheep, living in society where everybody's happy with their spoon.
Welcome to the long version with Fletcher Long and Charles Rollo. Fletcher, we got an interesting topic today because I think this is something that pervades and is very pervasive in the United States right now, very divisive issues. Is the United States is not necessarily at war with another country, but at war with itself.
It really has netted a very negative impact on people's manners and the way in which they interact with each other. There was somebody that put something out on Twitter, Charles, that I found particularly poignant. It was she was some sort of a black author or writer. I can't remember her name, but she said that she was approached by a Trump fan who demanded of her why she didn't support the president. And her response was, I don't support the president because people like you approach me and make demands of me to enlighten you about my views, and you think that you're absolutely entitled to a response, and you're not. And
yes.
I thought that was poignant because it's entirely true. I kind of, do you remember, Charles, growing up? You and I are roughly the same age. I'm 50. You might be a little older or younger than I don't know which.
We won't go there.
We won't go. Yeah, we're not going to go into our weights either. But do you remember when you were told that there were two topics that you were never to discuss in public?
Or at the dinner table.
Or at the dinner table, politics or religion, right?
Right. And
it seems now that's all we ever discuss is politics and religion. And both of them are very divisive topics.
Yes. My experience and what I see happening is people are insistent on changing other people's minds rather than accept their political views. So I have friends that are not of the same political persuasion as myself, but that's fine. They can believe what they want to believe and we can still be friends, but there's a lot of people out there that don't feel that way.
I think you just hit on something, Charles. That's really the issue, isn't it? The issue in today's society is if you do not agree with me, I hate your guts. And I'm not going to take any amount of time to try to look at the scenario from your perspective. I'm not going to try to consider what your viewpoint may be and why it is your viewpoint. You disagree with me, ergo you are wrong, ergo you are bad, ergo you are evil. And I don't know how we got to that point other than the kind of hate dynamic that is working politically these days is kind of how we got here, I believe.
My experiences have been that I see a problem with people having that exactly what you said. If you cannot believe like I believe, we cannot be friends. I think and let you comment on this. I think some of this is due to the fact that years and years ago when we were children, there was a common goal, but there was different ways to get to that common goal. Now there seems to be different goals for different groups, and people, of course, they can't agree on how to get there because they don't even want to go there.
Well, I think here's the thing. Viewpoints are a matter of perspective, right? If you're a top 1%er, for instance, you're probably not in favor of the redistribution of the wealth because you hold all the wealth, right? I mean, you would be the one negatively impacted by that particular redistribution, correct?
Right.
Whereas if you're somebody that is from an impoverished background, and it's interesting to me, I enjoy these people, and I was talking to a friend here in Hopkinsville. I enjoy these people that are born on third base and believe they've hit a triple. I find that to be amazing. And, for instance, you've got, not to pick on her, but you have Ivanka Trump, for instance. She was, by age of 24, she was a high-ranking executive and well-paid executive in her father's real estate empire. Now, you're never going to convince me that she earned that position. And you're never going to convince me of that, because nobody by the age of 24 earns the right to be a leading executive in a multi-billion-dollar real estate business. Nobody. There's not a 24-year-old alive that has earned the right, unless they've started the business themselves, and then unless they have built the business themselves. In that way, they've earned it. But, like Bill Clinton, and not to say I'm picking all of the Trumps, Bill Clinton was the state attorney general of the state of Arkansas by 29 years of age. Now, when you're 29 years of age and you're the state attorney, I don't care if the state has 5 people in it, which is Arkansas has roughly a little more, but I don't care if it's a state of 5 people. If you're the leading law enforcement officer of the state in the United States of America, by the time you're 29 years of age, you've been placed there. Now, there may be some argument about how did Clinton get placed there. He wasn't from a particularly affluent background. I think his mother worked largely in a wealthy person's hunting lodge as kind of a housekeeper or something along those lines. But I mean, he was still, though, that aside, the help might not have come from his family, but somebody somewhere placed him, selected him, and put him in a position of immense power and authority that launched his political career from a very early age. I mean, he found himself on third base, Charles, without really having to hit the ball. You understand what I'm saying?
My research has indicated some of the similar, that he was groomed for his positions and pushed along. Why? Who knows?
Well, but, some of these, we look at people like a Don Trump Jr., Bill Clinton, the Bushes, they were, good Lord, every Bush, maybe Prescott Bush worked his way up from the bottom, but from Prescott Bush, who was the late George H.W. Bush's father, who was senator in the United States of America. But since Senator Bush forward, it's being a Bush has been a pretty easy gig, and the number one predeterminate factor of someone being a millionaire today is still whether their parents are millionaires. That's still the number one determinant factor. So all of it's a matter of perspective. So if you're one of these 1%ers, getting back to what I was trying to say, if you're one of these 1%ers, well, of course you're going to be an ultra capitalist, because that viewpoint would seem to suit you. What I don't understand are the Ted Turners out there that are 1%ers and yet seem to be socialist. I don't understand why they're socialist, right? But if
that doesn't make sense to me either.
If you take from the haves and give to the have-nots, where you are in the dynamic of have versus have-not is going to guide and direct whether you like or dislike that particular strata, right, or that particular formula. Well, it's a matter of perspective.
Let me present this idea to you, Fletcher. One of the things I keep looking at is I sympathize with people who have struggled, because I have struggled in my life financially at times, and they work hard, they do what they're supposed to do, and for some reason they just are unable to get ahead as much as and have the American dream. But do we legislate that and make, like you were saying, socialism? Do we institute a socialistic government in order to compensate for that? Or is it something that we as individuals should be doing? Let's say the Ted Turners, instead of saying, let's be socialist, why doesn't he say, hey, look, I'm going to give half my money away and try and create some situations or scenarios where people can advance themselves?
Well, I don't know, because we have a largely socialist society today. The mail service is socialist. The Medicare, Medicaid is socialist. Our retirement structure is largely socialist. We have a lot of socialism today, right now. Some of it's good socialism, some of it's not good socialism, but it exists. The biggest socialist, and I'm stealing this from a guy off CNN, named, is it Lawrence? What's Lawrence's last name? He comes on after O'Donnell, is it? I'm stealing from Lawrence O'Donnell that look at sports socialism. We take billionaires that own a sports team and we give them millions to billions of dollars in incentives. We build them stadiums and give the stadium to them, right? I mean, they get they get absolutely showered with money to locate a sports team to come into that town, to then turn right around and pay an athlete some obnoxious amount of money, all of which is paid for by the general taxpayers, who don't complain at all about having to bear this financial burden, because it goes to someone that they enjoy watching and that entertains them, on Saturdays, if you will, or Sundays, not to pick on football. You see, that's one of the most profound and obscene forms of socialism. Again, I'm stealing that from Lawrence O'Donnell, but I don't know I don't know. I can't really pretend to tell you that I know what the answer is. There's some things, for instance, healthcare, I kind of believe that if people are sick, they need to be treated out of the milk of human kindness, whether they can afford the treatment or not. I kind of think that. And I think most doctors agree with that. They took a Hippocratic oath to give no bad medicine. I think most doctors, it maybe needs to be their choice, right? But I think most doctors would agree that if a guy presents at the emergency room, doesn't have any ability to pay, and is dying, they still have to treat him to a point where he's not dying. They have to render him some treatment. So,
yes. And then we get this whole debate about how those things are going to be paid for. And my thing is basic health care. People should be allowed to have basic health care. And it should be on par with what people pay for, or those people that are able to pay for it. I don't think, that is a socialistic idea, but I think it also is a human idea that we want to take care of our own.
Well, the amazing thing is that you have this far right, and I find this to me does not jibe ideologically, but you have this far right Christian movement, and they're all just conservative as hell. And that's interesting, because Christ was the ultimate socialist. I mean, you're talking about a cat that in 33 years just kind of cruised around, talked about God, was supported largely by the women that were going around with his troop, was begging every meal. I mean, he was a guy that lived off of the charity of the people that's helped support his movement entirely. And, everything about the commune in which that group of people, meaning Christ and his disciples, lived, everything about it was socialistic. I never get mad, for instance. I typically tend to be a conservative thinking person in a lot of areas, right? Grew up in a conservative household, that kind of thing. But I never get mad when, and I'm a Catholic, I never get mad when my priest is a liberal, because I kind of think he should be, because of religion and the different dynamic. But I kind of think he should be. And that's why the Christian right is always kind of interesting to me, because many of the things that they say are not things that you would ever imagine Jesus saying.
Yeah, there is a whole thing that I debated a number of people on, and one of those is in regard with not the separation of church and state, but the obligation of the individual to the state versus to their spiritual beliefs. And somehow they try to blend these together and make them work. And I keep telling them, no, that's not what Christ told you to do. He didn't tell you to go get involved in politics and disinherit people from certain things and cut them off. That was not your job. Your job was pretty clearly laid out for you, is that you got to help the sick and the needy and deliver the gospel. And boy, do I get backlash on that.
Oh, again, it's that America at war with itself, that many of the viewpoints that I'm sharing now, I will get a tremendous amount of vitriol, and so will you, Charles, for having even said it. right? I mean, we've gotten to a point now, and I argued for nearly 20 years, when I was a professional trial lawyer. And I used to tell young lawyers that when the disagreement is reduced to yelling, raising your voice, screaming, and posturing, the first one to do that has lost the argument.
Right.
Those are the physical characteristics of an argumentative loser. You've lost.
Yes.
If you've had to lose your cool, you've really lost.
Yeah.
You can't be afraid, as someone who was good enough at arguing, Charles, to have left the amateur ranks once. You cannot be afraid to face the viewpoint that differs from yours. In fact, you have to embrace it. You have to understand it. You have to comprehend it in order to defeat it.
And then there's always that position that I said, let the chips fall where they may. If I'm wrong and you're right, well, then I'd rather be right than believe a lie or believe something that's not true. And you have to eat your words sometimes. And if you're not willing to do that, then you're not really willing to look at what the truth is and get at the truth.
I think what's interesting, somebody said one time, obviously this show, the long version today, was a radio show at one time on a regular analog station with a stick and a frequency and everything. And I had a co-host at one time named Cliff Ritter. And Cliff and I could not have been more diametrically opposed as political viewpoints. Cliff was exceedingly left-wing. And interestingly enough, he was exceedingly left-wing and liberal, even though he had served with distinction, was a war hero, and was living on disability from being wounded in action in a theater. I can't remember which of the theaters he served. We've been at war so long in this country now, Charles. I would imagine the present war would have been the one. But what was interesting about Cliff used to say, so-and-so would rather get it right. No, so-and-so would rather appear right than to actually get it right. And it kind of came to me when I was off, was people would rather be told they're right than to actually get it right. And I think that's really the issue, is that people have this opinion. Like, for instance, we talked about the black author who said that one reason she didn't support Trump was because it emboldened people like the person who was doing it to come up and confront her and demand to know of her why she didn't like him and expect that they are entitled to an answer, which they're not. Well, people today have a viewpoint, and they just cannot consider that it's wrong. They cannot even fathom that they might have been misguided or misled. And they have this belief that anybody that's ever differed with them is some car salesman that has attempted to sell them a bill of goods, and they're just not going to fall for it. And I think that Trump has traded on some of this, because no matter what they report about Trump, even things that are discernibly true, even things that are discernibly, you cannot argue, for instance, that he made the unfortunate untoward comments to Billy Bush that he made prior to his being elected, because that's his voice. I mean, that is he saying it. He started out with, well, that's locker room talk. I've heard stuff like that similarly said in a locker room, I suppose. But now he's come up with, that's really not his voice, which is an interesting thing. But for someone to just ignore, this is not a commentary on the job he's done as president or hadn't done as president. It's not a commentary on whether it disqualifies him from being president. The requirement of being president is getting more votes than the other person. That's the only requirement of which I know, other than being at least 35 years of age and being a natural born United States citizen. So he fits the requirement. I mean, well, he got more electoral votes. I'm not going to get into the popular vote issue, because we've had an electoral college ever since I believe since the beginning, pretty much. I don't know that we've ever popularly elected a president. since we reformed as a constitutional republic. But that angst that is born from people taking differing viewpoints and neither one of them being able to even consider the other one has any merit at all is where I think that this acrimony, I think that's from where the acrimony comes, Charles.
I heard an interesting conversation between Ken Starr and I can't remember his name, Bill Clinton's why does my brain stop working?
Ask myself the same question.
Anyway, his press guy that worked for him, and there was a debate over the collusion thing with the Russians. I thought it was interesting that this discussion.
You talking about D.D. Myers?
It could be D.D. Myers, yeah.
All right.
But Ken Starr says, well, legally, there's no basis of any broken laws. And the other guy, I'm supposing is D.D. Myers, said, well, but the American people believe there is. And I'm thinking, but if there's no basis in law for something to be illegal, why is it important to make it? May have been, the conversations that Trump's son had with Russians probably was ill-advised, unwise, maybe even immoral, but it's not illegal. And someone wants to take something that's not illegal, judge it in the court of public opinion, and make it illegal.
Well, let's say this as far as illegality. Whether or not it was illegal for Don Jr. to have a meeting in Trump Tower with a Russian agent or asset depends on what they were discussing. If they were discussing somehow affecting or impacting the outcome of the election by subverting information from the public that should have been rightfully in the public arena, then that would be illegal. That is illegal. If they were discussing whether or not they were going to build a tower in Russia from which the president would stand to, upon being elected, would stand to garner hundreds of millions of dollars in profits, that is illegal in that it violates the emoluments clause of the Constitution, potentially. I don't know if that comes with a criminal penalty, right? But it would be, you can't conspire with a foreign government to, in essence, take over the country, to place a compromised individual into the presidency. That would be illegal. I don't know that that's what happened. I don't know, for instance, that even the Muller report is going to even say that that's what happened. I think that's the $64 question that everybody's waiting to hear. There are a lot of things that could have been discussed in that meeting that would make this would make this entirely legal. But it's going to depend on what the topic of the conversation was. And I don't know that we have anybody that's going to tell us. What do you think about the Mueller report so far? He's been a whiz bang at prosecuting people for tax fraud, it appears, and for failure to disclose they're a foreign agent as a lobbyist, it appears. But I don't really know what, if anything, it has shown to date or will show, versus the central question as to whether or not the Trump campaign colluded with the Russian government to win the election and impact the United States of America's policy in regard to Russia. And I don't know what, if anything, he has shown or will show in that regard. And that kind of that's what we're all waiting to hear. And, when they commissioned the Warren Report to determine whether or not Lee Harvey Oswald had actually been a lone actor in killing John F. Kennedy, that report remained sealed for, 50 years, Charles?
Yeah.
So I don't know that this Muller report, the Kenneth Starr report was salacious and talked about all kinds of cigars and all kinds of stuff being used in a manner which cigars are not generally used, I should say. But that report was made almost immediately public. I think other than the Starr report, the Warren Commission's report was more in line with the question being answered here, because what we thought in the Kennedy assassination is that this was not some crazy lone gunman. There were theories that Lee Harvey Oswald was actually a CIA asset that was killing Kennedy. Maybe the mafia had something to do with the death of Kennedy. Maybe Lyndon Johnson, and it was an overthrow of the United States government to place Lyndon Johnson in the presidency before he could get indicted himself for some kind of shady land deals in Arkansas that everybody in the deals except for him did get indicted, convicted, and sent to prison over.
Yeah.
So we don't, as we sit here today, people ask me about the Mueller report all the time. And I can't say what it's going to contain, what it will contain, what it's even going to tell us, or if it's going to tell us anything at all.
I wanted to just say that on the Kennedy assassination issue is that there was a very public event. I mean, that was filmed by cameras. The Magruder film, I think.
Was it the Zaputa?
Zaputa, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
The film. And so there was a very public event, where as opposed to the collusion meetings were behind closed doors and kept very secret. And so it's a much harder and even with an exposed public event like the assassination, we still really haven't gotten any answers here on the public side.
And I don't know that we're going to. I really think that when the report finally comes out from Mueller, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be disappointed.
Oh, I think so. I think that the report, when it comes out, it's not going to contain what a lot of people think it's going to contain.
And I don't know that we're going to know what it even says.
Yeah. So is this report like a jury? The longer it's out, the better it is,
I don't think so. I think that it was going to take a long time to conduct this investigation. And I think Mueller strikes me as someone that is a pretty careful plotting type. I saw a lot of those types as prosecutors through the years. The plotting type, the connect the dots type, the non-flashy, just the facts, Joe Friday type.
Right.
And one thing is, I want to go into one thing, speaking of a country at war with itself. The theory that has been promulgated from the top down that the Mueller team is a bunch of Democrats. I think there's 13 Democrats that are on the team, but all the people that are head of the FBI are all card-carrying, notorious, lifelong right-wing people. Mueller included. Rosenstein, definitely. So I don't know that it's a party issue with them. I think they're trying to get to the truth to answer the underlying question. Whether they will or not, I don't know. But I think that's what they're trying to do. I don't have the dark motive ascribed to them necessarily that has been ascribed to them. I don't know. I've never been a big fan of the media, and it's kind of funny, Charles, because now you and I are members of it, but I've never been that big of a fan. I've never been that big of a fan of the media. I think that the media has some has been I don't think that they're out to overthrow the country. I don't have the dark intent that some people believe. I think the media is out to curry interest and sell newspapers, if you will, which is that's going to be an outmoded comment at one time or another, Charles, because nobody sells newspapers anymore, and newspapers are for sale all over the country. They're
Right.
trying to unload them as fast as they can unload them.
New
They're
technology
shrinking.
is taking over.
Right. I mean, if you get a WordPress program, and you're a newspaper. Everybody's a news reporter today. We're all reporters, all of us.
Yeah.
I get a little offended because I write for Kentucky Prep Gridiron, and people say, "Well, you're a bloggist." I'm not a bloggist. I write for an online magazine because it doesn't come out, because we're not killing any trees, because it's not being produced in paper or in print. That doesn't make it any less of a news entity in my mind, right?
Well, with the advent of a lot of new technologies coming, it's going to be more news on your mobile device. This is where you're going to get your information from.
Look, we're doing a podcast, for instance, right? Well, back in the old days, if you couldn't get a television station or analog radio station to put you on air, you couldn't have a program, right? There's no program. Nowadays, there are famous people that have podcasts. Rachel Maddow has a podcast. I think that Sean Hannity and Rush Limbaugh, I don't think Rush Limbaugh has a podcast. He's more of a traditionalist. He's still on those stations, But a lot of people have podcasts now. It's very popular. It's a popular modem, and some of them are famous people, and some of them are you and me, right?
Right.
But the technology exists for you to do it. I mean, you can have it if you choose. And what I want to see happen, first of all, the theme of the show is a country at war with itself. I'd like to see us able to have a healthy debate again with some degree of civility, without it being reduced to name calling, questioning someone's loyalty to the country, questioning whether or not it's fake or real news. I'd like to see us have an honest debate and actually consider our opponent's viewpoints. And if you can consider it and then agree that it's misplaced or it doesn't persuade you, if it persuades you, Charles, I'd like to see you change your mind.
Yeah.
I think that's the height of an intelligent person, is someone who is capable of changing their mind if the argument is persuasively enough and supported well enough to warrant the change of position, that they're able to change their position. I think that's one of the real marks of erudition to me, is the ability to change your position based on a well-made argument. I'd like to see us able to do that. I think we need to quit with the slinging and the name calling and the vitriol and the anger
of people.
Yes, we need to. These aren't villains. This is someone with whom I don't agree. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, we don't agree. I'm alarmed as I look over news that's being sent to me, even while we're doing this podcast, of the reemergence of groups like the Klan, neo-Nazi groups, different hate groups that have never been gone. They weren't gone. And incidentally, the film was the Zapruder film. I called it Zapuda. It's Zapruder.
Okay, got it.
Zapruder film. These groups have never gone away, Charles, but they used to be unpopular to be openly espoused. And now what you have is I'm expecting any moment for the Klan to just march right down the middle of the street, stick a cross in the ground, and light it afire. I mean, I'm waiting for that moment because I'm sure it is coming. I'm sure it is upon us, because it's become in vogue now to have these type of ideologies, and I think that the hate vitriol in which we're engaging politically is supporting, propping up, and giving rise to the reemergence of these groups.
I think one of the things I mentioned to people I talk to a lot is that fear makes people do crazy things. I mean,
Mhm.
they do things when they're afraid that they wouldn't normally do. And I think fear is driving a lot of this reemergence of these groups and the divisiveness, and people are just afraid and they need to stop being afraid.
Well, I think that one thing that was appealing to some of the movement that overtook the government in 2016 was the position of you need to take your country back. These immigrants, half-bloods, whatever you want to, these we're poisoning. This is still our country. The women, the women are taking the country away from us. A lot of misogyny today, I've noticed, directed at women, sometimes by women. Some of the most interesting misogynists that I've ever seen, Charles, have been women. I have known women that you could say some of the most bombastic, misogynistic things to, and they would just agree.
Mm.
And can you imagine the self-hatred required for you to just buy that position? You have been lauded into a position now where you don't even disagree with your
Right.
own evil.
Yeah.
And of course, as Christianity teaches us all that we're all inherently evil. And I think maybe we've forgotten that, Charles. We used to know that we're all inherently evil. You're evil, I'm evil. Without a savior, we're in trouble.
Right. There people divide themselves in the group, my team and your team, and my team is all good.
We're the good guys. Yeah, we're the good guys. You're the shit.
Yeah.
We're the good guys, and our viewpoint's completely right. You're the bad guys. You hate this country. You're trying to subvert, destroy, and overtake it, and you must be stopped at all costs.
Yeah.
I don't know that we saw the world in such black and white terms once as we're seeing the world today in black and white terms.
Yes. I think, and I've had the discussion with people before. I'm afraid we're going to see civil war in this country if we don't back away from those divisive villainizations of people.
Well, right. And, that type of demonizing that we seem to support, buy into, believe, want to believe about immigrants, Mexicans, black people, white people, it just seems to me like that we've forgotten that the operative word there is really people. We're all people. We're from different backgrounds. We're from different perspectives. I remember when America was the great melting pot, and we used to want people to come here and we would make them Americans,
Right.
And that is not anymore. I wonder what the words on the Statue of Liberty, how they would read today, because what's on there now is give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuse of your teeming shore, send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift up my lamp beside the golden door. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. We don't want them anymore. I don't think America wants those people anymore. But that was the promise. That was the American promise. That was on what we founded the country. That was what that is for what we stood on the global stage. The country that would take your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore, the homeless, the tempest tossed. We don't want these people anymore. In fact, we want to build a wall, keep them out. And, is that the right answer? There are a lot of people out there that would absolutely argue that it is.
Yes.
But that's not traditionally the American answer. First, we have to recognize traditionally that has not been the American answer.
I think we would get a lot of pushback on different areas. The extreme view would be completely open borders. We don't want that. We do have an immigration system for bringing people into the country. We need to make it better. I think we need to deal with the people that are here that have been supporting the American system, working, have children. We need to make a pathway for them because they're here and they've contributed. And if they're not career criminals, then we need to make a pathway for them to stay.
Well, here's the thing. This whole thing about the borders was born from a desire to interfere with drugs entering the United States of America, right? I mean, that's really what it was, the cartels. How do we keep the cartels out? And, what do we do about the drug problem? And I've heard two answers. Some people have said, if we get rid of Mexicans, we just got to get rid of the Mexicans. I think that's an oversimplification. That's not. I really think that drugs enter the country via points of entry more than they're swimming across the Rio Grande. I mean, there's only so many drugs that you can come across the Rio Grande carrying if you're swimming across the river.
Yeah, it is a natural border. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a natural border. And that's really, stopping the Sinaloa cartel and the Tijuana cartel and the Gulf cartel. That's really what this is about. It's now kind of shape shifted into being about, well, we're losing our jobs. They're taking our jobs from us. But what the control over people immigrating into the United States was to try to control the cartels from using the United States of America as a distribution point to derive profit from their drug trade. And I understand that. That's a very laudable reason to want to control immigration in the United States. We don't want scads of MS-13 and cartel members entering the United States of America unchecked and committing atrocities in border towns and even in middle America. I understand all of that. I don't disagree with that. I just don't know that building a wall, like, for instance, if you'd asked me prior to 2016, Fletcher, how do we do this? I would have never, I have to be honest, Charles, I would have never come up with, we'll just build a big ass wall. I mean, that to me, I would have probably laughed at you if you'd have come up with that. You know what I'm saying? I mean, just build a big ass wall. That's what you do. You build a wall. I mean, I don't know that I would have come up with that answer. That would have been my answer.
Right.
I don't know that I have answers, but now if people want to tell me that will do it, that walls work. You hear people say all the time, Charles, walls work. You may be a walls work person. I don't know. Walls work. Robert Frost once said that good fences make good neighbors.
Yes, yeah, I read that too.
So I don't know. I'm certainly willing to listen to that viewpoint. And if walls do work, if that will do it, then build a big wall. I'm with you. Yeah. I think that's the difference between you and me, Charles, and a lot of people in arguing today, is that you and I mean, you can change my mind. I don't know everything. I promise you, I don't know everything.
And quite frankly, I don't know even if that wall will ever be built. It's an idea. It's an ideology, and we don't know if that thing's ever going to happen.
It's become the only thing important to some people politically in this country now. Is whether
it is a rallying point for some.
I mean, it's literally before the governmental shutdown, if you'll recall, this is a good example of how we're at war with ourselves. They had a deal before the president that he was going to sign before the government shut down for those 30-something days that it was shut down. And all that had to happen was some of the more conservative voices, talking heads, started questioning the president's manhood for relenting on his wall promise, and it caused a 35-day shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
Ann Coulter, I think she called him words to that effect. Words to that effect. You can take that out if you want to. She called him. She called him something. She questioned his manhood, and the next thing you know, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, we're running a little short on time here. The meeting is going to close on us, Fletcher. So we're going to wrap it up, and let's continue this discussion on the next show.
We'll do it, and I'm looking forward to it, and I hope people find a great deal of merit to the show. You've been listening to the long version with Charles Rollo and Fletcher Long, and until we meet again, may God go with you.
Yes, and please send in your comments on the social media platforms that you're going to see this on, and any questions or items you'd like to discuss or have discussed here, post them as well. So thanks all. Have a good day. We'll talk to you later.
Feeling like a black sheep, living in society where everybody's happy with their spoon-fed false reality.